The day after my surgery, my husband walked in with a bouquet and a goodbye. He set the flowers on the windowsill, took both of my hands, and said he had fallen in love with my nurse. He said it softly, as if gentleness could turn betrayal into medicine. I watched the heart monitor trace a slow green line and thought, so this is what a quiet earthquake looks like. My name is May. I am 72 years old. I live on the south side of Chicago in a brick house my parents bought when I was a child. I taught literature for 30 years. I have a daughter from my first marriage and one granddaughter who believes the walnut tree in my yard is a castle. I married Daniel when I was 58. He was charming, careful with tools, less careful with feelings. He owned a small remodeling company that did well during good weather and complained during snow. The illness came like a dimmer switch. First a little fatigue, then a fog in my head, then the urgent surgery to clear a blockage that could have ended me. The hospital smelled like lemon cleaner and fear. My nurse was young, efficient, and kind. Her name was Lila. She brought ice chips like diamonds in a cup. She teased me about the old novels that I loved. I thanked her each time. I never guessed the thank you would turn into a goodbye. When Daniel delivered his speech, Lila was on shift. She stood near the window with a chart held like a shield. She did not meet my eyes. Daniel said love is strange and timing is stranger. He said he and Lila had not meant for this to happen. He said it would be better if he moved out. He said he would, of course, continue to handle the house repairs and the bills while I recovered, because he was not a monster. I watched his mouth move and I listened to the machine breathe behind me. I felt the old switch cut the remaining light from my heart. I did not shout. I did not beg. I asked him to bring my handbag from the closet and to leave the flowers where the sun could find them. He nodded and left. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a lock from the inside. A day later, my daughter Nora arrived from Milwaukee with her little girl, June. June stood on a chair and brushed my hair with gentle strokes. Nora did not ask for explanations. She said she had spoken to Mr. Patel, our family lawyer. She said he would come to the house the day I was discharged. She said we would make a plan with paper and patience. I nodded. The drip clicked. The hallway hummed. I thought of my mother's kitchen with the kettle whistle and the scent of cinnamon, and I held that memory like a warm coin. Back home, the porch light welcomed me. The dusty driveway held marks from Daniel's truck. His tool chest was gone from the garage. The walnut tree made its steady shade on the grass. I slept in my own bed with the window open to the sound of a train far off like a slow heartbeat. The next morning, a white envelope arrived by courier. Daniel had drafted a proposal while I was still in the hospital. He suggested we sell the house and split the proceeds. He said it would be efficient. He said we could avoid lawyers. He offered to leave me the older car and the living room furniture. He signed with a looping flourish and a postscript that he would, of course, keep paying the electricity until a buyer was found. It felt like a waiter who drops the check before dessert has arrived. I made tea and sat at the kitchen table where the sunlight falls across the crumbs and makes them look like gold. I took out my file box and laid the documents in a line. There was the grant deed from my parents. There was a trust my father had created when my mother got sick. There was a thick folder with the words life estate typed in the top margin. I had not read it in years. That morning I read every page. My parents were careful people. They had placed the house in a trust when I was in college. The trust gave me a life estate, which meant I could live in the home for the rest of my life. And no one could force a sale while I was alive and competent. After I passed, the title would go to my daughter and to June. The trust also contained language I had almost forgotten. If a spouse abandoned me during illness or attempted to access the trust property to his benefit, the trustee was required to defend the asset and refuse any claim. My father had been a librarian. He believed in quiet sentences that stand up like soldiers. When Mr. Patel came that afternoon, we sat at the dining table that still had a scratch from my third-grade science fair. He checked the trust and the deed with eyes that missed nothing. He said the house was not subject to Daniel's proposal. He said the trust was a wall made of calm logic. He also asked about Daniel's company. I told him my name was never on his business. Mr. Patel nodded. He said the first step was to notify Daniel in writing that any attempt to sell the house would fail. He drafted the letter while the kettle sang. The words were firm and kind, the way a judge speaks to a child. 2 days later, Daniel sent a text to Nora and asked for a meeting, neutral location. I chose a small bakery on Halsted with warm cinnamon rolls and small tables that encourage brief conversation. Lila arrived with him. She wore a new scarf and the same badge from the hospital. She looked at me like a student waiting for a grade. Daniel pulled out his proposal again. He said the market was strong. He said we would both benefit. I handed him Mr. Patel's letter. He read the first paragraph and stopped. He looked at me as if he had discovered a hidden door in a room he thought he owned. He whispered, "Life estate." He repeated it like a new vocabulary word. Lila cleared her throat. She said she did not want conflict. She said love should not be a war. I told her love is not a war and also is not a withdrawal from another person's savings without permission. Daniel folded the letter and put it in his pocket as if folding could change its meaning. He said we should be adults. I said I was an adult when I took vows and I am an adult now as I honor paper my parents signed before we were married. He tried a different angle. He said I had always admired his business sense. He said he could refinance the house, draw out equity, and invest it on my behalf, and I could receive a generous monthly payment. I told him he could invest in his own roof. The house was not a bank for him. He stared at the pastry case and then at me. He said he had moved into a rented apartment near the hospital. He looked smaller. Not thinner. Smaller. I paid for 3 coffees and left without touching his arm. The weeks that followed were quiet and hard. Healing is work, and so is building a life after a person chooses a different road. The porch light did its nightly duty. The yard smelled like cut grass. My granddaughter learned to ride her small bike from the driveway to the walnut tree and back without putting her foot down once. At night I read letters my mother had written when my father worked late. Her words were full of grocery lists and tenderness. Then Daniel sent an email with a subject line that said urgent correction. He had gone to a different lawyer. He believed the trust could be challenged as unfair to a spouse. He wrote that the law in our state offers elective share rights to a surviving spouse. He was not a surviving spouse. He had a sentence that sounded like a threat and a sentence that sounded like regret. I forwarded the email to Mr. Patel and returned to my tea. Mr. Patel asked me to meet him at his office with my papers. He had a plan that required precision. He suggested that we update my will and add a testamentary trust for funds that were not in the house trust. He suggested payable on death designations for my savings and my small stock account to go directly to Nora and to June. He reminded me that a will speaks only after death, while titles and beneficiary designations speak the same day. He also suggested a simple letter to my bank instructing them that no one had authority to request statements except me and my lawyer. I signed where needed and felt the relief that clean lines give. I also made a smaller plan with a softer heart. I placed a little money in a college fund for June. I wrote her a note that told her to open that account every birthday and say thank you to the walnut tree. I put the note in a blue envelope with a drawing of a tiny owl. I am a grandmother. I understand the importance of owls. 2 months after the bakery meeting, a formal invitation arrived from Daniel's lawyer. They requested a mediation to discuss division of marital property, including any interest in the residence. Mr. Patel asked if I wished to attend or to authorize him to sit alone. I told him I would sit with dignity and answer if spoken to. The mediation was in a room with a long table and a bowl of stale candy. A framed photograph of Lake Michigan hung above a copy machine that hummed like an insect. Daniel arrived with his lawyer and with Lila, who sat outside with a magazine. I sat with Mr. Patel and with Nora, who took notes and underlined the best sentences. Daniel's lawyer argued that Daniel had contributed to improvements on the house and therefore deserved a portion of the gain. Mr. Patel slid photographs across the table of my father laying brick, of my mother planting roses, of me painting the porch rail. He also slid receipts for the only recent work, which Daniel's company had been paid for like any respectable contractor. He pointed to the trust paragraph that required the trustee to prevent encumbrance or forced sale. He spoke politely and not one word longer than necessary. Then Mr. Patel paused and opened a different folder. He said there was an additional document the other side should review before we continued. He handed Daniel a sealed letter in my father's handwriting. I had not seen that letter since my mother died. Mr. Patel had found it in the trust file. Daniel opened it and read silently. The letter explained why my parents had created the life estate. It said my mother had watched friends lose homes to second marriages and to sudden greed. It said a home holds more than furniture and paint. It holds years. It holds birthdays and porches and the way the sun slants across a kitchen floor in late afternoon. It said any person who loved their daughter would respect this protection. Daniel's mouth tightened. He placed the letter down as if it had heat. He stared at the table for a long breath. When he spoke, his voice was lower. He said, "I did not know." He said, "I thought the house was a number on a page." He said, "It is not." He looked at me and, for the first time since the hospital, I saw a version of the man I had married, inside the man who had run. He asked if we could end the fight. He asked for a fair list of what was his and what was mine. I said yes to the list. I said no to us. The agreement we signed was simple. He kept his tools, his truck, and his company. I kept my home, my savings, and my quiet. He signed that he would not claim any interest in the house now or in the future. He did not ask for another chance. I did not offer one. We shook hands with the same courtesy strangers use when a train car lurches and they steady each other for a moment.
Lila sent a note a week later. She wrote that she was leaving the hospital to work in a different city. She thanked me for my patience. She said she wished me health. I replied with 2 sentences. I wished her wisdom. I wished her peace. Life returned by degrees. The kettle whistled each morning. The porch light glowed. Nora helped me prune the roses. June practiced reading with a book about a squirrel who wanted to fly and learned instead to leap. In the evening, I walked to the lake and watched the water stack into small silver lines. My body healed. My breath deepened. The house held me the way a familiar coat holds the shape of your shoulders. Daniel came once, months later, to fix a sagging gate that he himself had hung years before. He did not come inside. He worked with quiet care, then wiped his hands on a cloth and stood by the walnut tree. He asked about my health. I said I was strong. He said he was moving to a smaller apartment. He said he had learned to cook. He said he was not proud of who he had been during the worst week. I told him that shame is a poor carpenter. It builds crooked rooms. Better to use it to learn a straight line than set it down. When he left, I locked the gate and sat on the steps. The evening smelled like rain and basil. I thought of my parents, of their signatures on paper they hoped I would never need. I whispered thank you into the porch light. It flickered once, as if it heard it. Here is what I learned. Money and control travel together, but love and respect do too. Put your home in the right paper while you are calm, so that when storms come, you do not have to raise your voice. A will is not about death. It is about dignity for the living. A life estate is not a trick. It is a promise that a kitchen will see the same morning sun for as long as you have breath to stand in it. If someone you trusted chooses glamour over vows, let the law hold the walls while your heart catches up. Do not trade your porch for a person who cannot sit still long enough to watch the light change. Honor the elders who taught you to write names in ink and to fold letters carefully and to place them where the next hand can find them. Subscribe to Voices by May for more unforgettable family stories.